All right. Okay, we're recording now. Thanks. Go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry to interrupt.
no worries. And so tonight we're going to talk about what I would call kind of an edge case of the Scrum and Agile methodology. And we're going to talk about it in some concrete terms, but really we want to focus on the thinking process that goes into this. We oftentimes, as we are learning Scrum or implementing Scrum, we often kind of follow the rules. We know that we have our daily stand-up every morning at 9 o'clock, and we do our sprint planning every Wednesday, and we do our backlog refinement, and we have our checklists that we run through, but rarely in the classes do we really learn all of the nuances and some of the culture that comes with a Scrum implementation. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of kind of staff utilization as a Scrum principle. And I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see if I can get all this right. Okay, you should be seeing a title slide now. Great. So let's paint this scenario. You've done sprint planning, or at least most of it. You're sort of 80% done. You got all these tickets in the sprint. You're ready to go. Your PM has defined some sprint goals. And then oftentimes someone like me, frankly, an engineering manager will speak up and say, so, Jason, do you have enough work in the sprint? Do you think you're going to be busy enough? Do you think you're going to be fully utilized? And sometimes there's a case where a developer might say, yeah, I don't know that I have enough work to keep me busy for X number of days or hours or something like that. So then the question in my mind comes, why is that even a question? Why are we asking, do you have enough work at all? Well, let's dig into that a little bit. So I couldn't quite decide whether to think about this from a title of staff utilization or sprint goals, or just more simply productive or busy. So I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just defining those terms. And these are not dictionary definitions, but rather they are my own sort of emotional response to the words. And when I think about productive, I think about moving steadily towards the goal, whatever that goal might be. And we do things like we're focused on the high priority work. We're using our time wisely. We're going to minimize distractions. We get to work solving problems, and we help each other succeed in solving those problems. And so productivity is about taking where we are versus the goal and getting closer to it. It's about moving towards the goal. That is productive time. On the other hand, we can look at busy. Oftentimes we ask, so, hey, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a long time. Oh man, I'm so busy. Rarely is that communicated in a positive way. Oh, I'm so busy. I love it. Really? So when I think of the term busy, I think of sort of working feverishly without pause, frequently against a deadline or an unrealistic expectation. And so it feels to me like continuous activity. A real quick response is, man, I need that email yesterday. Why don't you respond to my Slack in 3 minutes or less? How come the sprint isn't over by the day 2? All of those sorts of things get you. The busyness mentality, if you will, often strives for quick responses, sometimes at the cost of productivity. And then also times when people are important or when people are busy, we think of them as important. Oh man, he does so much around here. He's so busy. Or she's such a critical member of the team because she's super busy. And then oftentimes we have an internal dialogue as a staff member in any role, which is I have to stay busy or I have to look busy so that my boss won't fire me. Because if I'm just loafing around, I'm not going to keep my job. And heaven forbid something like, during the workday, just sitting there and staring out the window, because that's totally non-productive time. It doesn't look busy enough. And so to me, as you might have gleaned at this point, I think of productive as a good thing, busy, not so much. Now, you can be busy while being productive. And in my experience, when we are too busy, we get less productive over time. So then what I want to think about is that dynamic of being in a sprint and thinking about, oh man, I should be busy. I should be busy. That may not be a healthy thought pattern, but what I really want to think is, how can I, as a member of this Scrum team, be productive? And again, I want to go back, define productive as how can I help move the team steadily toward the goal? Presumably we have sprint goals. So that is productive. Okay, so in sprint planning, do we focus on our goals, or do we focus on having enough work for all of our people? And again, I work in a software context, so I think of software developers, designers, that kind of a thing as the people who need work. And so oftentimes that question comes up on, oh man, okay, I got a lot of back end work in this sprint, but man, I just don't have very much front end work. So I might ask a front end developer, hey, do you think you have enough work? Do you need me to find you more work in the backlog? Should I go generate some work? Should I find a ticket that's in there somewhere? And that kind of thing. So we have this mentality of finding enough work to make sure we keep everybody busy. Interestingly, this is just sort of an aside, there are two practices that I've seen when we do sprint planning and we bring all of these stack of tickets into a sprint. We ask the question, okay, who's going to do this one? Who's going to do this one? Who's going to do this one? My experience is when we are assigning tickets or jobs or whatever we call them, assigning issues during sprint planning or even ahead of time, that oftentimes will lead to this sense of being busy enough. Because then I might go through and I see tickets assigned to Jason, I see tickets assigned to Kevin, I see tickets assigned to Brandon, and then I say, well, wait a minute, there's no tickets assigned to Stacy, she needs more work. That practice is not necessarily against Scrum, however, it's frequently not it is somewhat frowned upon, I'll say, because really the goal is to bring tickets in that will achieve the sprint goal, and it's a team commitment. So that's just one of those subtle practices that I find can change whether we are looking for more work or whether we're striving for the goals. If we've defined the goals and we ask the question, do we have enough work to achieve the goals? That's very different than, do we have enough work to keep Jason off the streets for 40 hours? I don't know. Very, very different question. So what I like to do is I like to have a few criteria when I'm doing sprint planning along these lines. I say, one, I want to deliver value this sprint. Do I have my sprint goals built in a way that I can actually deliver value to the product, whoever that customer might be? And include time for QA and release. For example, I have a QA engineer on my team, and when we do sprint planning, she doesn't have any tickets assigned to her. That does not mean I need to go make up work for her, because the work she will do QA on the other tickets that we're doing. So even though if she doesn't have tickets assigned to her at the beginning, she will by the end of the sprint. So include that time for the QA and release, because release is rarely as automated as we might like. And then the third thing to keep in mind when we're doing sprint planning and trying to fill up people's calendars is this idea of a less experienced contributor probably needs more direction. And so, for example, I might take a senior developer and say, okay, so you've got a really poorly defined user story here that says, make the widget for the thing. And they'll say, yeah, man, I'm good. That's enough. I got it. And that might be okay. But you take a junior contributor and it says, make the widget for the thing. And they're like, yeah, I don't know what that means. I don't have any idea. Does the widget have 4 sides or 5 sides? And so as we think about a junior developer or contributor to whatever craft, we want to be thinking about, have we broken it down to the level of detail and precision that will support their level of experience? But again, that doesn't have much to do with, have we filled up their calendar? So we define the goals so that we know we're going to deliver value. We include some, I'll say buffer time, although that's a different concept. Include the time for QA and release. And then we make sure that the junior or the person who's new to the team, they've got a little bit more precision and direction in their tickets and their issues, better defined. And so it might even look like a junior developer their calendar is more full because they got 5 tickets and they're written very thoroughly, whereas a senior developer might have 1 ticket or 2 tickets, and they may not be written out all that thoroughly. So things can change. So we asked that question of, in sprint planning, are we really thinking through goals, or are we focusing on filling up people's calendars? So I actually want to reframe 5 thoughts, and I put them all in one slide, which is a horrible presentation tactic, but I thought this might be sort of a take home. And so 5 thoughts that we want to reframe. The first one is, I need to find 40 hours of work for this developer. Okay, you might, but let's think about a few different thought patterns that might be more healthy. One is, allow that team to be self-organizing and just ask, do you feel good about the level of work that's in the sprint? Highlight the value of, I hate the term, non-productive time. Well, how did we define productivity? We said productivity is defined as anything that moves us closer to the goal. So non-productive time, things like, well, taking lunch, is that non-productive? According to all of the HR studies, yes, but does it actually help that developer deliver the goal to the sprint? Absolutely. Does staring out the window for half an hour thinking about a database architecture, does that move us towards the goal? Absolutely. So that non-productive or non-busy time can be the most valuable time you have in the week. For example, as a manager, supervisor, leader, if I encounter one of my staff, sort of back in the olden days when we would live in an office, if I kind of walked up to them and I saw that they were sitting on the couch just staring blankly out the window, I would not interrupt, because that's super valuable work. Whereas if someone is working on their computer and working down a checklist and they got their notes next to them and all that, okay, they could probably be interrupted, because that's a little bit more mechanical work. And so really highlight that value of just the thinking and dreaming of that non-productive time. And then to use a Stephen Covey term, sharpen the saw. If you end up only having 37 hours of work in this week, fine, read a book. Think about what you want to do. Go back and watch that webinar from or go back and watch the Colorado Springs meetup group that was recorded a month ago that you meant to attend, but you didn't. And so go back and watch that recording. That's all worthwhile time, and we don't have to fill every minute. So I need to find 40 hours. I don't think so. There's a few other thoughts. Here's a hiring manager or a budget manager's point of view, which is, man, if that person's not fully utilized, if they're not fully busy, I'm losing money. I am paying Jason $65 million a day, and my gosh, I'm going to get every dollar out of him. And I got to make sure he's doing really busy stuff. Maybe. Here's an interesting though. Product value, the value that we deliver at the end of the sprint, the thing that we do to make our product better, that is way bigger dollars than salaries. It typically brings in revenue and customer retention. And so product value is the most important, more than employee salary cost. The other thing is focus, especially on a sprint level, the team cost rather than an individual's salary. So you might say, hey, this team cost me $500,000 a year, and break that down into sprints. Let's say you've got 2-week sprints. And so you might say, somebody can help me do the math, but hey, this team cost me 20 grand a week, or 20 grand a sprint. Okay, that's a big deal. That's a lot of money. We should know that. And does it really matter that this person is paid slightly more or less than the other person? And does it really matter that this person sort of earned their money this week and this one didn't? Over time, it all balances out, but we know that we've got to deliver enough product value to offset that whole team cost, not an individual salary. And then when we do staffing, when we hire, we manage, we grow teams, we hire people, we want to staff for what I would call the average workload, not the peaks and not the valleys. If we staff for the valleys and say, okay, this is the minimum staff we can get by with, then every single day the team is getting further and further and further behind. However, they are fully utilized. There is never a moment that they're not busy. And so utilization is extremely high in that case, but the team has no chance of ever catching up. On the other hand, people say, oh man, I just need more guys. I need more developers. I need more this. But if you staff for the high level, the peak level, then you do a lot of work, and then when you have those troughs, you're wasting a lot of money because you're not getting value. So you want to staff for somewhere in the middle, somewhere in that average, to say, okay, we're going to have peaks and we're going to cover that by either just letting the backlog grow or hiring contractors. And we're going to have valleys of work demand, at which point maybe we can catch up a little bit. Maybe we can rest, give people a day off, sharpen the saw, those kinds of things. So when we think about spending money on people and then getting that money back out of them, that can be a flawed thought process. Here's one that I find is very, very common, and I find it's very, very common in product managers and Scrum Masters alike, and that is when someone finishes their tickets, because remember, we assigned them all during sprint planning. When someone finishes all their tickets, they can move on to the next thing, which means, hey, I've got these 3 secret tickets that aren't really in the backlog, but man, I'd love it if you could get them done. Or they are in the backlog, but they didn't make the cut for sprint planning. In the veil of transparency, that would be great. But the idea is, oh yeah, I have a ticket. Can you pull this in? Kind of a thing. That's a mentality. Sometimes it's okay. However, it can create some risk. So think about some other things to do with that person when they finish their task. Reach out and help a team member to say, hey, I'm done, but you look busy. What can I do to help you? And that might be, you know what, I'm really struggling with this thing. Or, hey, I need to research this topic and I just don't have time. Would you research that and come back with an answer? In the meantime, I'll be working over here. Or again, sort of back in the office days, I remember a case. We had a senior developer, absolutely brilliant, and sort of had finished his work about a day early. But another team member was really struggling. And he said, hey, you know what, let me just go get lunch. And he brought lunch back for he and that other developer. And so that saved a big chunk of time and stress, because the guy just, oh man, I got to stay focused on this. But the bottom line is he wasn't going to eat. So developer went out, bought lunch, came back. Was that the most productive use of his time? Absolutely. Because he was helping moving the team's commitment toward the goal. Was he busy? Was he utilized? Did we get our money out of him? No, not at all. We didn't hire him to be a delivery driver. We hired him to be a programmer. But that was the most productive decision he could have made. And so then the follow-up to that is, when you think about helping a team member, maybe you help by doing some pair programming. Maybe you can dive in on that ticket and say, oh, I've had problems like this. Let me help you. We'll do some pair programming. And then the person who's struggling gets a little bit of a lift, or vice versa. Hey, I'm done with all my thing, but man, your thing looks really difficult and confusing. I'd love to pair program because I'd like to learn that. And I don't know how to do what you're doing right now. And pair programming, the data shows us totally counterintuitively that development teams that pair program end up being approximately 25% more productive than teams who only do individual development. That does not make any sense at all. You would think, I take 2 developers and I sign, and they're fully utilized, they're fully busy, I get X amount of work. If I pair them up, I should get half of the work, right? I should get half of the productivity, but we don't. We get 125%. And it is totally counterintuitive, but the idea is the quality of the work gets better, the quality of the thinking gets better, our team competency grows. Pair programming, I'm a huge fan. And so if you're done with your work, pair program with someone else, either because you can teach them or you can learn something. And then the last thing is, there's a Scrum principle that says any developer on the team can spend some of their time, there are differing beliefs, but refining the backlog. And when I mean refine the backlog, maybe it's the first time they've ever read the backlog, and just scroll through the tickets and see what's in there. Because you might find as a developer, oh man, I could do that in an afternoon. This is easy. That, oh, wait, I did that last week. Close that. Or, oh, man, I didn't realize that's in there. That's a security risk. We need to get on that. And, oh, shoot, we have 3 weeks to get it done. Refine the backlog. Spend some time looking at the backlog, figure out what's there. That is a valid use of developers' time. It's totally okay for them to spend that time, rather than picking up new work out of the backlog that we didn't commit to as a team. Okay. Okay. Mid-afternoon, man, I've been crunching. I'm focused. I skipped lunch. I was really tuned into this role, and now it's only 3 o'clock, but man, I'm finished. So what is that internal dialogue when 3 o'clock shows up and you're done with all of your assigned work? That internal dialogue is often, okay, I'm wrecked. I'm tired. My brain is completely fried. But my boss expects me to be here for another 119 minutes. So I better find something to do. And I better pull in another ticket. Yeah, maybe not. I want to suggest there's a few other ideas that you could do with that time. One might be, finally, and I know I'm probably not the only one here that's bad at this, but finally clean out that email inbox. You know, the one that has 43 messages in the inbox that you swear you're going to get to. You've actually solved 5 of those problems, but you never deleted the email and you forgot to respond to Jason when he asked you where are the slides for Tuesday night. All of those sorts of things. Read your email every now and then. You might learn something. You can clean it out. That's a good use of your time. Stay on top of things. Administration is probably one of the least loved roles of a developer, but properly administering our environment is a big value. Or what I was mentioning earlier, go stare out the window. And I mean that literally. Now, right here, I'm looking at a window. I'm actually at my parents' house this week. However, in my office at home, I have a window right next to me. I absolutely insist I've got to be able to see outside. And I find at times just an idea shows up and I'll wander off and I'll stare out the window. Just when I might not have a thought, not right away, but I might stare at the clouds or the trees or the cars driving by or the squirrel in the grass or whatever. And then just, you know what, there's an interesting idea. Let me make a note. Staring out the window is extremely healthy for our brain. And interestingly, if you think of the brain in terms of a computer model, which is not terribly accurate, but it's good for today, when we are focused on a task and we are really focused, we use up all the RAM in our brain. All that random access memory is just consumed, and it really won't allow any other creative thought to go on. But then when we just take a pause, take a step back, take that deep breath, stare out the window, all the stuff that the back of our brain's been working on shows up. And that might be, oh, right, I need to pay this. I forgot to, I was going to get gas today. I wonder if I'm going to have enough gas to get home. Those random thoughts will come back to you. And that's a very useful activity for the brain. And then you can take notes, because the more information you get out of your brain, the more productive you can be. So stare out the window is a genuine instruction with no agenda. Or, again, I'll say in quotes, go home, sign out of Zoom early, sign out of Slack, and just say, you know what? Hey, folks, it's 3 o'clock. My brain's fried. I'm done with everything I committed to today. I'm out. See you tomorrow. Go for a walk, go to the park, play with your kids, those sorts of things. And it's okay to go home early, especially when the beginning of the day has been productive in moving us towards the goal. Who cares if you're not utilized for the last 2 hours? Last thought that we want to reframe is, I've heard this said in engineering manager circles for a very long time. I wish I had more senior people. And those are things like, I wish I had people that could make up and imagine their own work without direction. I wish that I had more people who could do complex tickets. I wish I had more people who could write their own acceptance criteria or run their own tests. I wish I had more people like that, whatever like that means to them. So then my belief is this very last comment here is that senior developers are made, not born. You don't just show up and I read a book on C++, therefore I'm a senior developer. No, senior is something that is earned through experience. And it's not about a seniority title. It's about I have seen some things and I have fixed some things and I've refactored some things. And so now I'm more equipped to handle increasingly complex problems. Well, so how do we do that? How do we make senior developers? The only way we do that is we take non-senior developers who hopefully have some free time because they're not so darn busy being utilized, and we run them through the adult learning model. So let me back up just a second. What is the adult learning model? Without diving too deep into that, we think of the adult learning model having 4 stages. The first is sort of explaining. Let me explain what we're trying to do in this ticket. Now, a good PM, good Scrum Master can oftentimes ensure that that ticket is so well defined that you, oh, okay, I get it. I know where in the product, I know the purpose, I know the acceptance criteria, I know the approach, got it. I've got the explanation. And so how would I do that? I don't know, I'm going to have to learn. But understanding the context of that ticket, explaining the scenario is the first step of the adult learning model. The second step in the adult learning model is this idea of demonstration or example. So imagine that you're working with a senior developer who's working on a very complex problem, and you have this non-senior developer who would like to learn that, but never quite has the guts to speak up and say, hey man, I'm too busy to learn anything. But in this case, if they're not so busy, to say, yeah, oh, you said at stand-up, you're gonna finally attack that search criteria we've been struggling with. Can I watch you do that? Can you just show me an example? So that is stage 2. Let me just watch an example. And then the third stage is let me go try it and probably break it and probably screw it up. And so the third step of the learning model is practice. Let me go just try one thing. And hopefully in an environment of safety where maybe that senior developer's looking over the shoulder, again, pair programming. And then the fourth model, or the fourth step of that adult learning model, is around feedback or suggesting, aha, yep, okay, that didn't work out. Here's where you went wrong. Here's the thought process that you've got to get better. Or, you know what, that identified a weakness in you, go study this. And so we think about explanation, demonstration, practice, and feedback as the 4-step learning model. And so when we say things like, oh man, I wish I had more developers like, then great, go build them. And the way you build them is by ensuring that they're not always 100% utilized and busy. Because when someone puts in their development plan, I really want to learn that skill. And oh man, John has that. And I wish I had that. Oh, okay. Well, then let's put in the sprint some time for you to shadow John and figure that out. That's how we build and we make senior developers. So we're going to reframe some thoughts. Oftentimes we hear things like, I need to find 40 hours of work for this person because if they're not utilized, I'm going to lose so much money. But boy, if they finish early, I've got 3 different backlog tickets I want to pull in. And boy, if they're done at 3 o'clock, they better pull 6 more tickets in and get them cranking because I expect them to be busy. And man, it takes so much direction. I wish I had more developers like John. Those are very common complaints, especially in the Scrum environment. I hear it from engineering managers. I hear it from senior leaders. I hear it a lot from product managers who are just trying to get value out of the product. A different kind of mindset is allow the team to be self-organizing, choose enough work that gets us down the goals, and making sure that we're delivering value in the product regardless of how much time or effort it takes. And we do a lot of pair programming. We help each other, we learn from each other, and we take some time to breathe and dream and do our administrative tasks. Those are all critical elements. Okay, we're about done. So what happens when there's one person that is just slaving nose to the grindstone and they just can't get it done and they're racing the clock, the sprint's about to end, and then there's three yahoos that are like, yeah, I don't have enough work to do, man. So I think today I'm gonna read a book and maybe vacuum. Yeah, I don't know, whatever. That feels weird. And it feels weird for both people in that party, right? So what we want to do is when we're managing our sprint on a day-to-day basis, we want to focus on the bottleneck. Every single process, every single sprint has a bottleneck. It is the thing that will determine if we move fast enough on that bottleneck, will we achieve our goal or not? Now, in some process flows, there's more than one bottleneck, but I can say there's one at a time, okay? And so be really clear about knowing where it is. Oh, I know in this case, I know this person's the bottleneck, or this technology is the bottleneck, or these 2 tickets are going to be the bottleneck, okay? And so we need to know where that bottleneck is. And from an engineering management standpoint, you want to hire your staff. You want to design the product manager's backlog, and you want to design every sprint knowing where the bottleneck is and put the bottleneck where you want it, not just kind of let it show up. Now that takes some experience to figure out where that is and where it goes and what do I do and all of those sorts of things. But be knowledgeable about where the bottleneck is and be intentional about where it is, because that's going to set your pace. When you know where the bottleneck is, then exploit the bottleneck. Now, exploit is not a great word that oftentimes brings up a negative connotation. So here's the intention. Make the best out of the bottleneck resource that you have. Make sure that that bottleneck is flowing as smoothly as possible. For example, if a developer is the bottleneck and a more senior, even more capable developer goes to get him lunch, that is exploiting the bottleneck, making sure that that bottleneck can stay in motion, in flow, stay focused. We want to exploit the bottleneck to get the most value out of the thing that's restricting our pace. Okay. Then subordinate other goals. What that means is, especially from a product manager standpoint, what that means is when you have a bottleneck and you got that bottleneck towards your sprint goals, everything that's not a sprint goal doesn't matter. You absolutely have to say it matters way less than what's going to get us to the sprint goal. Oh, hey, Bob, I could do this ticket. Does that get us closer to the sprint goal? Nope, then I don't care. Okay. So we subordinate the other goals instead of giving the development team that sense of, oh man, we got so many goals and they're all goals and they're all the top priority. No, that sort of defeats the idea of priorities. We want to find our goals, find our bottleneck, exploit the bottleneck, subordinate the other goals. And then we want to track our achievement of the goals, not the effort that we put in to get there. And we achieve goals as a team. If one developer says, you know what, I added very little to the goals, but I didn't distract from them, and I only worked, 3.5 days this week because I just didn't feel very productive, that's okay. Okay. So bottleneck is a whole science on its own, and I'm actually going to give you a couple of resources at the end, which I have found have dramatically changed my thinking around process flow and staff management. Okay, I want to open it up to question, and I'm going to prime the pump with 3 questions. Yeah, Dave, all of this sounds great. It's a good theory, but what about real life? Okay, there's 3 questions that often come up in this subject. What about underperforming developers? They say they're done, but it's only because their work sucks. Or they are the bottleneck every sprint because they're slow as Christmas. That is not a Scrum problem. That is a staffing problem. It's a learning problem. It's a discipline problem, and it's a managerial problem. It is not a process flow problem. And so don't let people's underperformance drive you to make bad process decisions. When you've got a developer or anyone really that is underperforming, let me tell you, the ideal world, you have that one-on-one and that individual says, yeah, I'm not performing up to standard. And then they either grow or get out. If they choose to grow and you think there's the potential for them to grow, then in an ideal world, you make that transparent with the team. Again, in an ideal world, that individual comes to stand up the next morning and says, you know what, I'm not performing at the level I would like. In fact, I need to learn A, B, and C. Can someone help me with that? Can I pair program this ticket? That is falling directly in line with that Scrum value of transparency and visibility of the work. Some of the work is make that guy better. Totally a good use of all of our time. So underperforming developers, that's a managerial problem, not a process flow. Multiple goals. Product manager comes and says, okay, here's the sprint goal. Oh, and also here's the other sprint goal, and here's the 7th unrelated sprint goal. And I think we can get all of this in because I pulled these 43 tickets in and all the story points work up. We're within 0.7 story points of the right number based on our historical velocity. That's confusing and overwhelming. Things never go right. The estimates are bad. So multiple goals are fundamentally a bad idea. If you have to have multiple goals in a sprint, make sure they are numbered. The only number that matters in that list of goals is 1. I have a Scrum Master that tends to, not a Scrum Master, product manager that tends to bring a lot of goals to the table, and they are numbered 1 and everything else. And that actually works okay. We're trying to achieve a lot of different things. The product really needs a lot of love, but you know what? There is 1 goal and he's real clear. This is it. We will do whatever it takes to get that goal. And then here's some other ideas I have that are, man, they keep coming up in my brain. I really wish we could achieve these. We got some tickets in there, but the number 1 goal, super clear. So if you have to have multiple goals, make sure you have a goal and then some other stuff. In an ideal world, we just have a sprint goal, right? But in reality, sometimes that doesn't work out. So then the last one, and I've struggled with this one, is what I would call long seasons of imbalance, where Jimmy, the developer, is the bottleneck because we're just doing his brand of work. And Susie is not the bottleneck. And so she's just kind of cruising, man. She's probably working 30 hours a week, not working all that hard. And man, Jimmy is slaving 50 hours a week and he's pulling his hair out. So that's okay for a week or a sprint or a couple sprints, or maybe even a few sprints. But if you are finding that you've got a long season of people that are constantly the bottleneck and slaving away, and people that are constantly in sort of a lot of that buffer zone, then you probably have a staffing problem on your hand. You're either choosing the wrong work or you've got a staffing problem. You can solve that staffing problem by either, upskilling, training that, you know what? And I'll give you a story. I had a front-end developer that was in that case. She was frequently underutilized. She's like, well, I got all this work that I'd love to do, but I can't do it because I need the APIs from the back end. I can't do it. I'm stuck. So I guess I'll do this thing, but not very productive. And I can't really get enough work. And that went on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Whereas the backend guys are fighting all kinds of security and compliance issues, all backend stuff, database validation. And so they're slaving away, and they're certainly not going to write this API for the front end for a lower priority ticket. So what did we do? We whined about it for a long time, hoping it would go away. B, then we asked, okay, should I hire another backend developer to solve that problem so that the front end can get going? Or C, what we ended up choosing was we took that front end developer and said, you know what, you got buffer time, go learn the back end. And what you can do is you can't distract that back end developer all the time, but go take a class, go read a book, and go write your own API. And you know what? I got to tell you, when you do that pull request, it's going to take a lot of review, and it's probably going to be bad. That's okay. The team will commit to your learning. And so over the course of about 4 sprints, it was painfully slow, but that front-end developer wrote a couple of their own API services on the back end, and then that unblocked a whole bunch of front-end work. And now that front-end developer is way more flexible because that buffer time was consumed with learning, and then it relieved the bottleneck of the back end. So that was an illustration of exploiting the bottleneck. Okay, so what kind of questions and comments sort of come up? What shows up in your internal dialogue when you hear me ramble on for half an hour like that?
Hey, so I have a question that popped up in my head on point number 1, which was, you go back a couple of slides, is about getting 40 hours a week. That one, I need to find 40 hours of work. So one of the things that we do in sprint planning, and I do feel like this is sort of a training wheels approach, and I've been considering for a while, rolling it around in my head, of encouraging teams to take off those training wheels. But this is what it is. We do sprint planning by capacity. So we do capacity planning. You're going to be around X number of days during the sprint. Then so let's say that for us, it's 9 days of a sprint times 8 is 72 hours. But we say, hey, we want you to fill up about 60% of that. No one's checking behind them to say, oh, you're at 61% or you're at only 50%. We say shoot for about 60% of your available time. And the reason we say that, and we explain this to them in the same way, is that, like, hey, we want you to have a balanced and sustainable workload. 60% is about the time that you should be, like, kind of that heads down working, keyboard, coding. The other 40% is you're walking the dog or staring out the window or reading a book or, having a meeting. But again, I've been thinking of trying to loosen that and shift more towards a goal, just like you're talking about, shift more towards a goal perspective versus a capacity perspective. I don't know. I don't really know what my question is. That was a thought that came into my mind, and kind of thinking, I'm just curious, like, your thoughts on on
Well,
that.
I
I
think
don't have
it's
a
an
specific
interesting
question.
perspective. And I think that oftentimes what I would recommend is a subtle change can make a huge difference there. Oftentimes in sprint planning, we start with the capacity and we say, okay, how many hours you got? Okay, therefore, how many points or whatever, how many tickets are we going to bring in? Another way to look at that is, okay, let's figure out how many hours is anybody taking PTO? Yeah, I'm out Thursday. Okay, let's reduce that. And so then you think, okay, we got 80% of our normal capacity as a team. Great. Now park that thought. Now that's a Scrum Master responsibility to figure that out. Then we turn to our product manager and say, okay, at the end of the sprint, what goal would you like to have done? And then what I like to do is say, okay, if that's the goal, let's pull in all of the tickets that it would require to get that goal achieved. And you might bring in 2 tickets, or you might bring in 20 tickets. I don't know. It depends on the goal, right? And so then you can ask the question of the team, and you could do fist of 5. You could just do thumbs up, thumbs down. You could do a variety of things, but say, okay, do we have all of the tickets that are required to achieve the goal? Yeah, boss, we got that. Okay. Now, given the capacity that we talked about earlier, can we achieve all of these tickets? That's really the only question that matters in that case, in that environment, because if someone says, well, I have enough work to keep me busy up to 63%, so I'm good. Okay, but the team commitment is what matters. So I think about define the capacity, define the goal, pull in the tickets to meet the goal, and then do the fist of 5. And if you just get this wild thumbs up, like, oh man, we're going to be done with this tomorrow. Oh, okay. Hey, product manager, we need another goal. Let's add to that. Or if you get a lot of that hemming and hawing, I don't know, maybe, then you might not, you probably need to take some of that out. Maybe you can't achieve the goal. Let's rewrite the goal to be less than, or ask the team, hey, what's it going to take to achieve that? So I think that order is effective rather than, okay, guys, we've done our capacity. Now we've got X number of hours. Bob, which 3 tickets are you going to fill up those hours with? And I don't know, that's just an internal dialogue that shows up for me.
Yeah. And so you were saying, take that, link it back to the capacity. Are you talking, because it seemed like we were talking about, at least in my mind, I was imagining, okay, individual capacity, but then we shifted to a team goal. Are we talking about when you're looking at that capacity to consider more of the team capacity versus an individual capacity when you're then shifting over to what's the sprint goal, because that's what the team is going to be doing?
That's exactly right. And hopefully you understand everybody's skills and the makeup of the tickets, because in that conversation, when you say, hey guys, can we achieve this? Give us our fist of 5. That's when the bottleneck shows up, because then you can say, oh man, no, that front end ticket right there, that's going to take 2 weeks on its own, let alone QA and delivery. Oh, okay. So that ticket is the bottleneck for meeting that sprint goal. Who would work on that? Can we exploit the bottleneck? Hey, Bob, can you help on that? It's not your specialty, but can we break that out? You do the easy part and give Jimmy the hard part. That's the way we have that bottleneck discussion during sprint planning, because we are focused on team capacity and team goal. And that's when it exposes the bottleneck, whether it be a ticket or an individual. Either way, we can look at it and say, okay, well then how do we exploit the bottleneck to be better, faster, cheaper? Okay, other questions that come up?
Yeah, in your just general topic conversation, are you guys releasing a product increment at the end of every sprint?
Are we releasing a product increment at every sprint? I would say mostly yes. I work with a variety of different products, and we have one product that is, I'll say, fairly difficult to release. And so we have a standard that we release something once a sprint. And sometimes that is 3 bug fixes. Sometimes it's a big feature. But our goal is that we would release the sprint goal to production at the end of every sprint, even if I'm working on a big project right now and we've got it all behind a feature flag. So nobody's seeing it, but we are releasing it to production virtually every sprint.
Okay. One of the things that challenges we face a lot the biggest challenge we face is our current homegrown CRM is a .NET based and it's monolithic. So we have long release cycles. We've actually cut those down from like 6 months to currently producing one every 2 months now. But that's always left us very exposed to falling back into waterfall ways because, we're not releasing something at the end of every 2-week sprint. So now it's like, well, we can kind of work on that a little bit more and tweaking that. So we always have scope creep.
Yeah.
And that's always a big problem where we're finding with utilization is we do hourly estimates, which are always terrible and never consistent.
Yeah.
And so we're consistently carrying over, even though we kind of followed something similar to what Jason was saying, where, in a 40-hour work week, we're only expecting dev to carry about 20 hours of development work that we're loading them up for capacity. So what are, do you guys have any suggestions to help with kind of reducing that scope creep and help improve utilization to focus more on what we can produce at like a sprint goal?
Kevin, that is an excellent question. And I think probably requires a significantly larger discussion than we have time for tonight. And I will share a couple of ideas that come up for me. The first is absolutely do your best, if it's technically possible, to release stuff more frequently. When you've got the sense of releasing, then you have a thing that is finished. Now, you might want to go back and do another iteration on it. That's totally fine. But delivering value is really only getting it in the customer's hands. Delivering value on the developer's local machine, that doesn't count as value. And so delivering value means releasing out to production, getting the customer's hands on it, and do that as frequently as possible. One of the other things that is very closely related to that is what I would recommend is the sprint demo, or this, and it comes with a lot of different names, but at the end of the sprint, do a sprint review, not the retro, that's different. The sprint review is with the development team and the product manager and other stakeholders, in your case, maybe the sales team, to say, here was our sprint goal. We worked on these, we had these challenges, we achieved A, B, and C, we didn't achieve D, and here's why. We're going to roll it into the next sprint, but yeah, this is what we did, and I'm going to go ahead and demo it for you now so I can demo working software. That sprint demo, even if you can't physically release the software out to the customer, that demo starts to develop that mindset of, wait, at the end of the sprint, I have to demo something. I have to be ready. And even if you're not ready to pull the trigger and release, you're still ready to demo it and talk to the customer about it. And that starts that cultural shift.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a little less than 10 minutes left. Other questions or thoughts that are coming up for people?
Hey, so this is Sheena. So with my organization, we're on a 3-week sprint cycle, and they do a release to the customer at the end of that. But the problem with that right now is I typically send back 50% of those items that they said they fixed as fails. Do you have any recommendations? Does anyone have any recommendations on how we can kind of reach in there and keep the time frame if possible, but try and build the quality a little better?
Sure, absolutely. And so when you say you send 50% of those back, is that at the end of the sprint, you do that review and you say, this is good, that's bad, kind of a deal?
Yes. So, so during the process, I'm working with the development team and the testing resources to check on things. But typically, we have multiple customers on this release. So typically what ends up happening is something that they fix for a different customer that I don't have purview over breaks something that my customer is using. And then we're right back into, okay, well, we need to wait until, May or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, that's a real big challenge, Sheena. And I totally respect the, the magnitude of the problem, because it's not simple. 2 recommendations, one short-term, one long-term. The short-term solution, in my opinion, is what in the Scrum world is called reduce the batch size. Rather than having a whole clump of tickets that, let's say it's 10 bugs and I'm going to get it to the finish line and then check one at a time. And you can check that early in the sprint if you can, because the developer might have been only half day on that one ticket. So then run it through QA, check it. How do you cross check it with other customers? So reduce the batch size allows you to spread those out through a sprint rather than getting this sort of waterfall dump at the end and then realizing, oh man, I broke half the world. So whenever possible, you want to reduce the batch size because a smaller ticket can flow through to the end without holding up other tickets and being quite that kind of the cascade. Long term, this is something I believe in. And if it's possible with multiple customers and multiple products, sometimes it's a big hill to climb, automated testing. Develop your automated test suite so that you know that, hey, we're going into this, all the tests are green except for this one, that's the bug we're fixing. And so then when I fix the bug, I can run the automated test suite and they better all come back green now. Not, well, I fixed that one, it went from red to green, but 3 others went from green to red. That's less helpful. And so an automated test suite, even if it's a checklist of tests where we know, okay, in this area, I've got to log in and do A, then B, then C. Oh, crap, it broke. So we know that what those acceptance criteria and tests are, they're defined up front. So then the developer can build around all of that. We can QA it and we can deliver it to the product. Like I said, automated test suite's fantastic. We just click the button and it runs. But even if it's a manual checklist or it's written into our acceptance criteria, that saves that last minute reject a huge percentage of the time. It just takes a really long time to build that up.
All right. Well, thank you.
You bet. Okay, I think we've got time for one more. Does anybody have one more burning question on their mind?
You know, this is not a question, but a real quick reply to Sheena, something that we've started doing recently is we were running into somewhat similar issues with a team releasing something that breaks something that another team was working on. And we started heading that off early on. We have 6 development teams, and every day we do a scrum of scrums, which is kind of that roll up where they just come up and give a little bit of info about, we've got 6 teams plus a couple of other folks to get through in 15 minutes. So it's really quick. And we weren't catching everything we needed to catch in that. So what we started doing was at the first day of every sprint. So teams already had their sprint planning. Then the very next morning, as they're kicking them off, we have a longer 45-minute meeting with that same group of folks where they go through their full sprint plan. And they discuss it in greater detail, and they say, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. We think we were planning on releasing this, this, and this, and it's incumbent on everyone else in that meeting to be listening for something that might cross over into their territory and be like, hey, we're working on that too. So can we sync up after this meeting?
Right.
So we do that once a sprint deep dive on the plans to coordinate the teams and try to head off any of those issues.
Or even one of those, hey, wait a minute, why'd you put that one at the end of your sprint plan? Because I need you to be done with that Tuesday because I've got a thing that depends on that. Can you bump that around? Oh, no, wait, I can't do that. Well, then we've got the wrong sprint goals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Jason.
Thank you. Yeah, communication, always the key.
I've got maybe a quick question.
Okay.
So we have some developers that we have contracted out with another company and they do a great job. They are really, really awesome to work with actually. And I was kind of thinking about the utilization perspective from that side a little bit, because it's kind of like, it's a little bit of a weird relationship, right? When you pay for somebody by the hour. And I work as a product owner and I'm kind of like, it would be awesome to have some time for these people to upskill maybe a little bit for stuff I know is coming up but it's not development work. And so it's a little bit weirder of a relationship. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, let me make sure I understand your question, Anna. So you've got these contractors that you use and you like, but you as a product owner, you have a sort of a bump in the work and you'd like them to staff up and ramp up, but it's not in this sprint. And you're wondering, how do you plan for that?
Well, kind of like, I know that there are skills that they don't have yet that they will probably need to work on some of the features that are being requested. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, it just feels like a slightly different relationship to me, maybe and if you don't have experience with it or I'm not articulating it, that's okay.
Well, I think I understand. And if I'm hearing you right, let's say, okay, we can do the work in the sprint and we're fine. We've got all the right skills. But as a product owner, you can look out 2-3 sprints or 2-3 months, whatever, and you think, oh man, we're going to have that. And that contractor doesn't have that capability. What could I do to get them ready for that, even though it's not part of this sprint work?
Yeah.
I would argue that the same issue exists when you're working with full-time staff or contractors. It's really about if you've got a long-term relationship with that contractor and you know they're going to be around a while, then go ahead and give them sort of a sneak preview of say, hey, I don't know when, but maybe like 3-4 sprints from now, we're going to be doing this work. And so I'd like you to be skilling up for that. And in fact, I would be willing to dedicate a day of this sprint to that learning. And so that as a product owner means you might be willing to sacrifice the urgency of some of your goals in order to get you some of that future training. And it's the same with in-house staff versus contractors.
Yeah.
And you call it's just learning time. It's a valuable use of your money.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, I wanted to wrap up with just one thought, and that is, what if you want to go learn more? Well, I have 2 resources, 2 books to read. If you think these are good ideas, the first one that I would recommend is a book called The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt. And it is written in a manufacturing context. It's a plant that's at high risk. They make widgets. They got to figure out how to make more widgets, more better, more faster, or something dramatic is going to happen. And so The Goal tells sort of a novella story of what we've been talking about today around utilizing bottlenecks and understanding where they are. Then later on, this book called The Phoenix Project was published in the context using the same principles as The Goal, but in the context of a software project, and specifically the relationship between development and DevOps, which frankly is oftentimes a contentious relationship. Those are two books I would recommend. If you're a heavy reader, I'd read The Goal first and then read the Phoenix Project. But if you work in a software context and you're only going to read one, the Phoenix Project is going to be your choice. Those are great illustrations of what's going on that you could probably relate to, and then kind of work out how these solutions presented in their context and how you might apply them to your world. So those are just a couple of references that I would recommend as further reading if people read these days. I don't know.
Cool. Thank you so much, Dave. And I would also second that. Those books are fantastic. In fact, I heard about them from Dave. So,
So you're supposed to say that, right?
Yep. I'll take payment later. No, they really are. They're really good. So excellent recommendations. You won't go wrong reading those. Dave, thank you so much. I've always thought that your teaching is very pragmatic and very applicable. So I always appreciate it, and I was not disappointed this evening either. So thank you for spending the time to get ready and to share that with us tonight.
Well, I really appreciate you all coming. Hopefully some of this was useful, and if nothing else, just spark some thinking. And I did share these slides with Jason. And so if you all want them, want a copy of them, want to scribble on them, you're certainly welcome to reach out to the meetup group. There's nothing secret or copyrighted in them. And so you're more than welcome to take them, use them, do whatever you like with them. And Jason's the resource for that. So, so I'm at the point in my evening where I'm going to sign off, but really enjoyed getting to meet all of you, getting to have a chance with a discussion, and look forward to joining more meetups in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Thanks all.
Dave.
Have a great evening.
Cool. Well, do you guys have Stacy and Sheena? I thank you for coming, by the way. I know it's your first time. I hope it was valuable to you. I'm happy Dave came along because I like listening to him.
That was great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very good. Definitely something to think about and for me to take back to my organization and try and get some traction on some stuff.
Yeah, cool. Well, hope you all have a nice Tuesday night and a good rest of your week.
You too.
You too.
Take care.
I thought, how did you think? I honestly thought it was really good. I
Yeah,
liked
no,
it.
he did a great job. He was very easy to listen to and some good practical advice there.
Yeah, yeah, it was good. I'm glad we got it. I'm gonna stop record. We're still recording.
Oh.